All right, guys, this is the Basement Lab podcast, and today we'll be discussing the Black Panther movie. Uh, be warned, this one will probably go on a little bit longer. There's a whole lot to discuss, but we feel it is very important to do so. Real quick, we're going to introduce ourselves so that you understand where we are coming from with this discussion. My name is Jordan. I am a straight white man. I am a graduate student. I study environmental injustices. I am an ecologist. And I grew up in Kansas City, Missouri, so a very Midwestern area. And you're going to see how these influences are going to play out with our different speakers. So,
I'm Sebastian. I was born and raised in New York City. Both my parents are Colombian, so I am Colombian American, and I do my research in a inner city St. Louis, looking at environmental justices.
My name is Zach Morris. I'm also a white dude from Missouri. I grew up outside of the second whitest city in America, although we debated that last week. That fact may not be accurate anymore. But I think I come from a different background than a lot of the people that are in our university, per se. And I'm also a master's student in fisheries and wildlife. My research is focused on fisheries, but I also do a lot of policy outreach that relates to water quality and environmental policy and things like that.
Yeah, my name is Tunde Ojola and I am from Nigeria. So I think I'm the one that brings the African perspective onto this table. I am also a grad student here in human dimension studies. So my study look at how people, interact and behave around natural resources. So I'm so excited to talk about the social aspect part of this conversation.
And my name is Russ. I'm probably the least qualified to talk about anything other than the qualities of the actual movie and the construction of the script, which will probably be my focus,
which is
as
fine.
it's what I am comfortable speaking about. I am originally from Dallas, Texas, and then made the move to Iowa as a teenager, which was a completely different environment. And now I'm living in Columbia, Missouri.
All right. So,
With that being said, I just want to put a disclaimer out there that Black Panther is not the first black superhero movie. There have been other black superhero movies. Spawn, for example, it was very shitty, but it happened.
Blade was very
Blade.
good.
The Blade trilogy.
I think it's safe to say.
I would give it. It is the first all black cast superhero movie.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that is an important distinction.
Yes.
And I think also it might be safe to say that it's probably the first superhero movie where the cast could only be played by black actors.
Yeah.
Whereas you could replace Blade with a white guy and it would still be a movie about a guy killing vampires. Although it may not be true to the comics and the way the artist created the character, but in this case the movie is written in a way that can only be played
And
by black
then
actors.
I also want to bring up that there is a difference between being black, being African American, and being African. Those words are not interchangeable. Many of us use them interchangeably, but there is a difference. So Tunde, for example, he is African and black. Am I correct?
You're right.
And then if Tunde were to have a child, the child would be born here. It would be African American and black.
Yep.
And then for a black person that has been here for many, many generations and we can't really trace where they come from, we would just call them black.
And I think one more thing that the movie actually also bring into a different perspective is how the blacks are being portrayed. So most previous movies, superhero movies or whatever, portray blacks as they are actually they follow the stereotypes, and most times they're not like the story is not all around them as the superhero. But this movie is all about the black and the African people in the movie,
It brings
and
up
all of
all three different cultures, really.
that. Yeah.
All right, so
So,
the movie.
real quick, just to kind of help bring context, is that for our white audience, is to think about it as you would understand the difference as an American of someone being I am Irish or I am German or I am Irish American, German American. Those are all differences that we understand and can place with culture. This is the same thing. and it is on it is on us to learn that. And so I'm glad that this discussion is happening so that I can learn. And I brought this up earlier in our pre-discussion that I'm an intelligent, very well-educated person who likes to consider myself open to everyone, and I have said sexist, racist, homophobic things in my life, and that's not who I am. And so once I learned about that, I wanted to change. And so hopefully, even with this, we're going to talk about this as a Marvel movie for sure. But we're going to bring up, there's going to be a lot of social issues that come up in this movie because there are a lot of social issues. And relating back to us as scientists in our research, a lot of this deals with environmental injustice and ecological degradation and things like that. And so we can actually talk in our wheelhouse a little bit as well. So just trying to get all that out there so you understand where we are coming from. And hopefully I don't say something stupid, but if I do, forgive me. I'm learning as well as everyone else. So
Come at you with the hammer of Thor.
This is going on YouTube, so you will not be forgiven.
No.
You will be crucified in the comments. But
all right, let's talk about how awesome this movie was.
Can I just say, again, this is a white dude from Missouri. My first reaction to this movie was that it was a celebration of African culture and just a different culture than I'm used to seeing on screen.
Yeah.
And even as somebody who's not from that culture, I found it refreshing. I thought it was an awesome visual element and a musical element that was refreshing and new, and I was happy to be on the screen. That was probably my first reaction to the movie.
Yeah, Hollywood, take notice. Just because we're straight white guys doesn't mean that we're scared or afraid of or not interested in other cultures. We want to experience other cultures. We want this. We want this magical experience of learning, like, oh my God, this is so cool. It's so different. That's cool. That's okay with us. Like, don't pigeonhole us.
I thought it was a really enjoyable movie. What I enjoyed about it the most probably is that I feel like every Marvel movie takes its basic template and expands on it into another genre, and this one felt like the most thought out expansion. So if I'm thinking about like Captain America Winter Soldier is a spy movie about like modern fears on drone warfare, but like it still feels pretty similar to Civil War, which is about a completely different issue, and the motivation of Captain America even changes dramatically between those movies, which is a criticism I have. So I felt like the integration of culture in this one was actually a thought out element and differentiating it, even though it hits a lot of those traditional Marvel beats.
Yeah, I think this marks the second Marvel movie that and I'm including Thor Ragnarok in this, that sort of signifies them maybe taking the franchise a bit of a different direction, where they're giving their directors a lot more free reign. If you've seen Thor Ragnarok and any other Taika Waititi movies, this is very clearly a Taika Waititi movie. It's a little bit tongue-in-cheek. It's very meta. It's self-referential. It's almost a parody of itself. Well, that's What We Do in the Shadows. That's the other movies that director has made. And this being directed by Ryan Coogler, who has made several other, or a couple other strong movies about African American characters and African American culture in Oakland. To be honest, I haven't seen Creed or and I'm even forgetting the name of the
Fruitville Station.
Fruitville Station. That same type of storytelling as being a black guy from Oakland comes through in this movie in a way that I think in previous Marvel movies you don't see Jon Favreau's stamp or Joss Whedon's stamp in such a recognizable way that's different from the Marvel formula, if that makes sense.
I also liked how it wasn't in my opinion, it wasn't what's that word I'm looking for?
I don't know.
We talked about it earlier in Spider-Man, how Homecoming was not an origin story.
Origin story,
yes,
yeah.
I thought that the origin story for Black Panther came in Civil War?
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah, it was like very quick, 15 minutes, Dad died, you took the mantle, you are Black Panther, the end. This was more of T'Challa growing into the Black Panther that we need to see before Infinity War starts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I definitely like the. It was a pseudo origin story,
Yeah.
as it talks about how he becomes the Black Panther, not a Black Panther, but the Black Panther. But he's already the Black Panther.
Yeah.
It's like Spider-Man: Homecoming. He's already Spider-Man. This is how he grows as that character
And becomes the Spider-Man.
Yeah, and so that's nice. Now, guys, I'm not gonna lie. Black Panther is not one of my favorite Marvel characters, even though one of my favorite authors, Jonathan Mayberry, did write Black Panther. He was never a character I really followed, but the minute I saw this trailer, I forget which movie, I think it was Thor Ragnarok, I saw this trailer, and I was like, I want to go see that movie. It looks so good, and this is a character I do not follow, and it was well worth the hype. I think they hyped it just the right amount.
I mean, within a week, more than one of us sitting in this table saw it more than once.
Yeah.
And Zach can attest to this. I hate watching movies more than once.
He won't go see a movie twice. The only movie he's ever watched more than once is Deadpool, and now Black Panther.
But superhero movies tend to be really long. I don't have the attention span for that. Black Panther, I just thoroughly enjoyed so much that within 24 hours, I had to go see it again.
And I will say, to your point, Jordan, about the trailer, everybody was really excited about the trailer, and I just didn't get that excited about it because I've become pretty cynical about new superhero movies coming out.
Fair enough.
I love Batman, and no one's made a good Batman movie since 2008, and that makes me really sad. And so every time a new superhero movie comes out, I am expecting it to be just fine, or another episode in the Marvel TV series that I'm gonna go watch, and so I went into it with the hype that I heard from critics and things leading up to the movie coming out, but I wasn't hyped months in advance by the trailers. I thought, oh, that looks like it'll be better than average for Marvel, but I wasn't expecting it to blow me away like it did. And we'll get into this in a minute, but I think on top of having a very refreshing way of telling the story and immersing it in a different culture, it was a good movie. It had a great script. It had amazing characters. It was perfectly cast, and they acted amazingly. And believe it or not, probably the least interesting person in it is the Black Panther, who
Martin Freeman is
Russ
in that movie.
okay,
Martin
fair
Freeman
enough,
is
fair
in
enough.
that movie. Which, by the way, is the hardest stretch of all the science, all the fantasy elements, is Martin Freeman being an American. I love Martin Freeman. I love him, but Martin Freeman as an American, really?
But I think before we jump into specifics, I want to hear everybody else's thoughts. So, what you guys want to weigh in any more about your general thoughts about the movie?
Yeah, before the movie, I wasn't super hype about it. Yeah, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go watch it, because it's like a Black African predominantly cast movie, and I want to support it. But after watching it the first time, I was really blown away. The message was deep. There was a lot of subtle messages that I could really, really identify with. And so, I went back thinking about all of that, and I was like, wow, I need to go watch this again and then see how all of that connects. So, yeah, I think it's actually a very good movie. Well, there's a lot of, some flops around the casting too, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But I think it's a really good movie.
Did anyone else see it more? Jordan or Russ, did you see it more than once?
I did not have time to watch it more than
So
once.
three of us.
So us three, Tunde, Zach, and I have seen it more than once. But did you feel the second time that you saw it, you picked up a lot more messages that you may not have picked up the first time around?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Yeah, I did a couple of that. Like the one I told you earlier on about the kids outside, talking about
Breaking apart
the ship. I was like, wow, did I say that? Why would I say that? Like, why would the author make the kids? And we'll still talk about that in a minute too. And a couple of other messages I picked up the second time too.
So
yeah.
I think. Oh yeah, sorry.
I just want to add in the three things that I would highlight about the movie that kind of caught me off guard if we're talking about general impressions is one, with Marvel movies, I expect really poor cinematography, and by that I mean that they use really bad color grading, and this movie was really dynamic in how it presented the cinematography, and that kind of, it's not only aided by the culture, but like the way the shots were designed kind of specifically takes into mind variations and like color and stuff like that are a lot more interesting than the very drab looking. Honestly, they look like a TV show, all the rest of the Marvel movies, because of the decisions they made. So the autonomy they gave the director to make those decisions, I think, pays off and highlights some of the culture more.
Yeah.
The second thing is, you talked about the trailer not being excited. I thought that car chase looked boring as hell when I first saw the trailer. And the car chase was a lot better than I thought. The action sequences were a little bit more in depth and engaging. And then the last thing I want to say is, I was expecting, having seen other movies, to enjoy Michael B. Jordan just because he's such a charismatic actor. I was scared the first scene they showed him that they were gonna just coast on charisma, and he is easily the best villain in the Marvel series.
He's the best villain. Yeah.
He was, for me, he was the best
for
part.
Halloween.
Yeah, you know, when The Last Jedi came out, I was talking about how I thought Kylo Ren was one of the best movie villains in recent memory, but I think Killmonger has surpassed him. I think he's an
But I
amazingly
think
written
that they're
character.
both sides of a similar like movement, and they're both different versions like
Yeah.
of that. So you have like the stereotype of like the really angry entitled white person, and then you have this person that has like actual ideological points and differences, and I think it's an interesting distinction.
But in any case, they're relatable, and you understand their motivation on an emotional level, and it's not just
Even if you don't agree with them,
Right.
you understand where they're coming from and why.
Oh, I was rooting for Killmonger 95% of the movie.
Yeah, actually, some people said Killmonger is actually not a villain. You know, it's just a different
Opinion.
opinion.
He's an antagonist,
Yeah.
but in a comic book you have to have a villain.
Villain,
But no,
yeah.
I would absolutely classify him more. If it wasn't a comic book movie, he would be an antagonist, not a villain.
Not a villain. Yeah.
In this, he has to be a villain because it's a comic book movie, and you have to have big villains.
The good and the bad.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I think now getting more into specifics that the script did the best is one of the first things I look for in a comic book movie is the villain, because you have some awesome villains in comic book movies. Again, I love Batman. I love the Joker. And you also have some really bad villains in comic book movies like Steppenwolf or Ares, or you could keep going down the trail, Ultron even. But things that you can kind of look for is, does the villain's motivation and goal affect the hero specifically, or is it a generic, I'm gonna
Destroy
try
the
to
world.
destroy the world.
Yeah.
I hope you can stop me. Where those are stakes that we don't buy into anymore because we've seen them on screen before. But the stakes that we're buying into in the Black Panther is, I'm gonna take the throne from this guy, and we buy into his motivation, and it's very personal to the hero. And so the hero and villain are appropriately scaled to one another, where at one point they have a fist fight without any superpowers, but it's still very tense, and it's still a very impactful moment in the story.
But that stays with the Marvel template, though, because if you look at Iron Man, which it's probably the most clearly modeled off of in terms of structure, the bad guy in that one is a twisted version of Tony Stark's ideology. The bad guy in
Are you talking about the original with Obadiah?
Yes.
Okay.
Even all of the origin movies are like twisted versions of the main character. So what I thought this one did better than those, though, is that it wasn't just like, I'm going to take a superficial trait about someone and make them different. It was actual like ideological concerns that you see represented more in culture. So instead of just Obadiah is the bad version of Tony that doesn't learn his lesson, you have these actual discussions where there's right and wrong, but there's a gradients in between them.
I brought this up to Zach, and I mentioned this to Tunde yesterday, and I actually want to get an English teacher's point of view of this.
Okay.
After seeing the movie the second time, I realized there was a theme throughout the whole movie, and the one theme I picked up on was kind of having a sense of place, and because of the repetitive question, who are you? And it did not only affect Killmonger, or Eric, because he didn't know who he was. He was kind of confused whether he was, a person from Wakanda, a person from outside of Wakanda. But T'Challa also struggled with that, not knowing who he was as a king, not knowing who he was as a Black Panther. Other characters, Nakia, struggled like that because she wanted to do more than that Wakanda was doing. So she struggled with the whole, who are you? And even at the end, the question was brought up throughout the whole movie. At the end, the little kid goes to Charles like, "Who are you?" And that's just how it ends.
Yeah, I could actually see that brought up with a lot of the main characters now that you mention it. I mean, we see that even Martin Freeman's character, who are you? What are you doing? He had to make a decision of what he was going to do. We look at Shuri.
Sure.
Yeah. What are you? Are you a princess? Are you a scientist? What are you? Killmonger's father, the prince. Are you a revolutionary? Are you a spy? Are you a prince? Who are you?
T'Chaka, the previous Black Panther.
Yeah.
Are you a noble king? Are you a murderer? Like, who are you?
Yeah, no.
Okoye deciding whether or not her loyalty is to the throne or to T'Challa or to an ideology, and ultimately.
Well, I think we're getting distracted from the original point you were making because the movie is definitely about identity, but the original question you were asking was you noticed how identity was connected to place, and I think that's one of the things that the movie does more thoughtfully. And when we gave the disclaimer and we're making these distinctions at the beginning of the podcast, I think the movie's making those distinctions and talking about how environment affects your perception of the world. Especially the big debate I've seen about the movie is because the movie is very much about an area that's somehow unaffected by the deep history of colonialism. And so that affects their ideology, that lack of experience with colonialism versus the main character who's experienced the evils of colonialism and it affects his worldview. And I think you get kind of a compromise as the main character starts to see the other point of view towards the end of the movie and the fighting.
So what else do we like about this script, about the story structure and things like that? I know, Rex, you have a lot of thoughts, but if anybody else wants to weigh in.
Well, I would love to start by talking about how African culture was actually well portrayed in a way, because you see all the actors actually identify, even the director actually. I read a commentary where he talked about how he went to South Africa to embed himself in the culture of Africa to bring that into light, and you see that in the outfit of all the actors and the way so bringing that out, I that was really very beautiful. Trying to speak with the accents of Wakanda and all the things about the culture, spirituality, and all of that. I love the way it was really portrayed in the movie.
Yeah, I loved the costuming, and I was really hoping it was authentic, and I saw a lot of reports that it was authentic, because again, it's not something that we have experience with. A lot of times, Tunde and I were talking about this earlier, that a lot of portrayals of Africa in America are not pleasant ones.
Yeah.
They are very unfortunate. Africa is a giant continent full of many cultures, and it can't all be bad. A lot of it's got to be good too. And just seeing some of that, like, non-stereotypical garb and stuff like that, and just being like, wow, that's beautiful. It's a culture completely unlike one I know, and I can appreciate it, and I'm glad that I get to see that. So
I thought they did a good job of seamlessly blending the culture with the technology, right? Because it's supposed to be the most technologically advanced city on the planet, which would beg one to question, okay, well, why do they still observe these traditional cultures? Well, our technologically advanced cities in America are a melting pot of dozens of cultures from people all over the world, and so there's no such thing as American culture, except maybe what's defined by pop culture of recent history. But you can't, we're not building Star Wars cities or anything like that, and so we don't have those.
Cloud City, America. Ooh.
So it's neat to see how maybe if West Africa was the most technologically advanced part of the world, how those cultural traditions would have been incorporated into society.
Although we have kind of seen that in Marvel with the whole, like, white tradition versus lots of technology in Thor.
Mm-hmm.
And so we kind of see that, but that's fantastical to us.
Right.
This was much more.
And that's a little bit spoiled because it's hard to celebrate Norse culture in America without being a white supremacist.
Which is unfortunate.
It is unfortunate.
Because I am really proud of my Norse heritage.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that I can't just go around proclaiming it, because there are a lot of douchebags that have hijacked it.
Right.
It's like a lot of things, it can be hijacked, and it's unfortunate, and we should take it back from them. I'm just saying
Sure.
that. But yeah, no, and that was one of the things that got brought up, where a whole lot of white supremacists before this movie were like, oh, if there were a white movie that portrayed this, then can you imagine the racist outcry? And people are like, you mean Thor?
Exactly.
You mean the movie Thor?
Exactly.
That people loved? Yeah.
And I think
wouldn't say people loved it.
Well, I wouldn't either.
They tolerated it, which is why Disney had to make the third one more interesting.
Well, right. I'm talking like the Thor, like, overarching story and how it grew better. I didn't like the first one.
And Thor, the character, is one of the more interesting Avengers, in my opinion, because he's not just a guy with a bow or somebody who's good at shooting things.
Well, Hawkeye sucks at everything. Hawkeye sucks.
But I also feel like celebrating that culture is more appropriate in Norway than it is in America. Not more appropriate, but because celebrating it as a society or building a city around it is weird, because we're not.
We're a melting pot.
We're a melting pot, exactly.
Right.
Even in the whitest parts of America, we're not just predominantly Norse heritage or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
Scandinavian, I suppose, would be the correct way to say that. So I did think it was a well done job of blending that cultural tradition with the advanced technology in a
Yeah,
believable
and it definitely
way.
seemed much more. It seemed much less fantastical, and it
Right.
seemed more grounded, not in reality, because again, it's a
Science
fantasy
fiction.
movie,
Yeah.
but more grounded in the universe, more grounded Earth side, and so it seemed more appropriate.
That
more
ties back into the script and structure, though, is because it's more believable because we actually understand the character's emotions.
Yeah.
And there's depth to the emotions and there's depth to the culture. And so by seeing that, I feel like that's one of the strengths. But if we're talking about script and structure, I also think that's one of the weaknesses of the movie is the script and structure. Because it has to hit those Marvel beats so much that there's points where the movie threatens to get even more interesting than it is, but it has to pull back and go, hey, I'm a Marvel movie. So we have to have Martin Freeman flying a plane, spoiler alert. Like him flying the plane was like the most unnecessary add-on to an action scene, but you need spacecraft in a Marvel movie. You need people flying around. And so like
I would have liked the movie a lot more if they had killed him at the end of that when they're like shooting into the lab, yeah, spoilers and everything, because I think that would have added a lot more weight and motivation to his character, like he's willing to die for this cause. Also, my biggest critique of Marvel movies in general is they don't kill anybody, and that's why I hated Captain America: Civil War. It's a movie about stakes that has no stakes. But that's another discussion for another day. But I agree.
Oh, no, that's happening all today, maybe.
I think probably my two biggest critiques of the movie were its predictability and the fact that the spaceship looks so dumb. Having seen it twice, the first time I was very close to the front. I didn't get quite the right angle to appreciate the cinematography, some other things. Seeing it again, a lot of the visuals looked better, and some of my critiques went away. I don't know if it was the second screen had a brighter projector or something, but sometimes in these awe-inspiring African landscapes with the beauty of the culture, you have this really dumb-looking spaceship flying across the screen, and then also spoilers.
again,
Like,
we
big
have
time
we have
spoilers.
talked that we don't care
Yeah.
about spoilers. People.
When he throws T'Challa over the waterfall, I don't care because I don't think he's dead. I know he's coming back. It's a Marvel movie. I think that was still relevant for the story because the rest of the characters needed to think that he was dead for the story to advance in the way that it did. But honestly, some of those little hits were super predictable. This is a Marvel movie. He's not really dead.
Yeah,
I don't think the movie wanted you to even bother to care to think you're dead. It was more
Yeah.
important that the other characters did.
Yeah, because it's
Yeah.
titled
So for me,
The
the
Black
predictability
Panther.
there wasn't the problem.
You know.
And I don't, and that's why it's not a big problem for me. I agree. But go
Yeah.
ahead.
But the predictability becomes a problem when they have to have an action scene, so the character's interesting motivations have to be done through action, and the movie doesn't really like show character through action as much. Like they have a little bit of it during the fight scene towards the end, and they have you can see the differences in characters through how they interact on the battlefield, but then they keep cutting away from that to Martin Freeman flying a ship because he has to have something to do.
You have to
Like
justify
the-
that paycheck.
But at the same time, it's for me it's like the biggest critique of the movie is I wanted more of the small intimate action scenes like him having to fight on the waterfall and less of these big scale things. So the movie does do a nice job of scaling down I'm going to end the world type things, but it doesn't completely escape that Marvel formula as he's trying to export all the weapons at once.
Right.
And so I thought that was to the detriment of the characters and the development of
Yeah, and
towards
guys-
the end of the movie.
Just view it this way. If you haven't seen it, I don't know why you're listening because we
I don't know
give
what
spoilers.
you've been doing for the past week and a half, really.
But this movie
Exactly.
What is wrong with
deserves
you?
this movie deserves all the praise it's been getting. That doesn't mean it's without flaws.
Oh yeah, I have
It's with
a couple
flaws.
of tips with the movie.
But also, it's a Marvel movie. It has flaws, but it's a good. It's not even my favorite Marvel movie, but I think it's the best done Marvel movie.
Oh yeah.
I think
it is
written.
the best Marvel movie. It's not my favorite. My favorite is actually Winter Soldier in the MCU, and overall, it's either going to be Deadpool or Logan.
My
But
favorite is
this
Deadpool.
this
but
is
this is the better movie
This
than
is
Deadpool.
this is the best Marvel movie I think they've made. It does have problems, but it is definitely worthy of the praise because again, as a Marvel movie, it's a progression, it's a move forward, but it also introduces a whole lot of social commentary that is kind of needed right now. So
Yeah, there's something I also observed I love to talk about is the underrepresentation. So they try to represent black culture, I understand that. But if you look at the scene that was shot in Korea, or
the Korean one.
Yeah, they were in
the
Busan,
fight,
Korea.
and then when you go to the club, you see there were just white people there. Like, where are the Asian people? Why they're not well represented in that
I was
scene?
confused by that because I used to live in Korea,
Yeah.
and first of all, in Korea, there's a lot of Koreans. It's Korea.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I know.
What?
But also, any foreigner in Korea stands out and is looked at and followed.
Yeah.
So I can only imagine these giant entourages of Africans going through the city completely unnoticed. That's not how it works.
Well, they kind of made up for that when T'Challa was going to kill Claw.
And
And-
everyone is standing there with their cell
Oh,
phone.
where they were-
and
yeah.
what's her name? Wakabi comes.
No, Okoye.
Okoye comes in. Sorry, Okoye comes in and it's like you're being watched.
Yeah.
That kind of made up for it. But what I had a problem with the Korea scene
Yeah.
was the fight scene there seemed a little bit too choreographed for me when T'Challa was fighting.
it was. I mean, they
In the club?
actually.
In the casino, it looked very choreographed. I expected what was gonna happen.
I think that fighting was good, especially
Oh,
the
yeah, it was enjoyable.
Okoye's fight. Wow, I love.
Yeah.
Oh, one thing we need to talk about is the women empowerment. How they were well represented.
Oh yeah, very much so.
Very much. Yeah.
The other thing that I wish they would have gone to explanation, and I know Zach might punch me in the face when I say this, but was when Killmonger decided to burn the Garden of the Purple Heart. Does this mean?
Awful.
Does this mean that T'Challa is the last Black Panther?
Okay, it's called the heart-shaped herb, and no, it does not mean that he's the last Black Panther. They only did that so that when Infinity War comes along, we're not all sitting there wondering why they don't just give all the Avengers the heart-shaped herb and make them super.
To me, this was actually the biggest plot hole. Okay, you're talking about a society that is highly intelligent, very advanced. They somehow took all of this wild herb,
Put it in one place.
put it in one place, and don't have a seed bank.
No, they have a seed bank. It's growing somewhere else.
Right,
They didn't
right.
show us that on camera.
Yeah.
No, they're
That's
like,
not a plot hole though. That's just unexplained. A
Yeah,
plot
it's
hole is where
unexplained.
something people overuse that term.
It is-
As an English teacher, I'm
Oh,
like,
okay,
it's
sorry.
It's unexplained. That's not a plot hole.
And I think it's safe to say that if something unexplained, or if a character is not shown in a coffin being lowered into the ground in a Marvel movie, that unexplained thing is going to come back in another movie, or that character is going to come back.
Right, but they
in another
acted
movie.
like this was the last Black Panther. We'll never have this herb again. I'm sorry, no. You have seed banks, you have grafting, you have scientists. You've never mapped the genome of this plant.
Because I know Shuri, there's one point in the comic book world, Shuri does take over the mantle as Black Panther.
Which is going to be awesome when it happens on the screen.
Yeah, that-
she was
that
my
would be
favorite
pretty
character
Yeah,
in the movie.
T'Challa gets sick or something. He's very injured and he can't,
Okay,
respond
fine.
to
Okay.
to duty, and Shuri takes over the mantle as Black Panther. So I was just curious if we're burning all of the purple heart-shaped fruit in Wakanda. Does that mean that T'Challa is the last Black Panther? Now, the third thing I have a problem with was the M'Baku tribe.
Okay, yeah, that seemed a little contrived and forced.
If you're a vegetarian, I don't know if you said this as a joke, how do you have all these animal furs on you? Do you just wait till the gorillas die and then you harvest it? How does that happen?
I think you're maybe thinking about that a little too much. I would say you could be a vegetarian for health reasons. and
Also,
don't kill
I
animals
did
for
not
fur.
like, maybe I'm overthinking this too much, but the gorilla noises they were making, I had a negative portrayal of that, and I thought it may portray some sort of stereotypes,
Mm.
and personally I did not appreciate the gorilla making noises that they were making when they told Ross
Yeah.
to shut up.
Well, I didn't see it like that. I think it's cool because each culture back at home has their own cultural way of celebrating and,
Okay.
and speaking and communicating. And I think for the movie as gorilla. As a gorilla tribe, sort of. That's why they are vegetarian and they make that noise because gorilla is doesn't
No,
eat.
they can.
They eat flesh. They eat flesh.
But it's not.
It's not they go looking
Yeah,
for
no,
it.
no, no.
They
They
don't
go
hunt-
looking
yeah.
for plants.
They don't
Is
hunt
it-
like chimps.
They don't.
Right, yeah. They go eat plants, but they will eat you if you get in the way.
That's true. Wow.
Like,
Yeah,
they'll take
but the sound, I don't personally,
Okay.
I don't.
Right.
Yeah.
No offense in
See,
that.
now-
Maybe it was just me overthinking.
Yeah.
No,
it.
when that was going on, I had that thought. I didn't view it as such, but I thought, I bet some people will take it that way. The one that got me was at the very end. Oh, let's break it down for parts. That was the one where I cringed. I was like, oh, am I supposed to laugh? Am I supposed to feel ashamed? Am I supposed to just take that in stride? That was the one that I was like, that's a really negative portrayal.
I think that one, personally, and we spoke about this in
Yeah.
the pre-discussion,
Yeah.
was they're trying to kind of do the stereotypes,
Yeah.
I don't know how else to call it, of the three groups that I mentioned earlier, the black, the African American, and the African. And they were trying to be like, hey, this is black stereotype, we're trying to build a science center here, ...
Would that
I
kind
don't
of be
know.
like what they're doing at the beginning of the movie then, where they set it up with gang movie stereotypes, and then you kind of find out that they're just trying to distribute weapons to help like an uprising of
Right.
oppressed people.
Yeah.
So would it be a similar kind of subversion of the trope? Is that what you're thinking?
That's how I viewed it.
Okay.
Okay.
And I think it worked that way as well because it just points out that, okay, we haven't seen this neighborhood in 28, 30 years, whatever, and
Has it changed much?
it hasn't changed much in this type of neighborhood where, stereotypical or not, the characters portrayed on the screen are talking about, oh, look at this expensive thing, let's break it down and sell it. You're bringing in somebody who can teach them about the technology of this fancy thing and give them something that's worth a lot more than just the raw value.
Also,
You know-
the very quiet middle finger to the DC
Yeah,
world by
yeah.
saying, T'Challa going, see that building? Yeah, I bought it.
I
I bought the one next to it.
I laughed at
and
that
I totally
too.
bought the one next to it.
Yeah.
I bought the entire
All that.
block.
Yeah.
Your move, Bruce Wayne.
I did laugh at that. Yeah.
Do you know what? Going back to the scene where the boy talked about breaking down the spaceship, I think now that I just thought about it briefly, I think that was actually there's a big mistake in that because on average, a kid will not say let's break down. They probably say let's go fly this shit. Something like that. Like how do we get into this thing? I would think that would be like a normal,
Yeah,
natural
'cause they're like,
response
what,
of someone.
10,
This
12
is
years
cool.
old?
Yeah.
This is cool. Let's go ride it. How do we get inside this thing? Instead of let's go break it down.
You're not
I
thinking
don't
about
know.
making money until you're worried about,
Yeah.
hormones and whatnot.
Well, if we're going with that, maybe kids that are born in inner city areas, they might have to grow up faster and
Mm.
provide means, like monetary means, to bring into the family to help them.
Yeah.
Because you can look at, famous music artists, 50 Cent is one that comes into my head. He was trapping at a very young age. He lost his mom at a very, very young age. Because he was out on the streets, had to hustle, had to provide a means of income. So maybe, these 10, 12 years old, they come from an area that's very impoverished. Mom and dad may work several jobs, still can't meet ends meet, and they're like, you know what? This would be a great way to make a dinner.
Yeah, so I think we're going to move a little bit off the Marvel and movie aspect and start getting into the more social issues now. So
Yeah, and
don't be afraid to bring them up now.
I've got a thought that relates to kind of both of the issues that you just brought up, Sebastian, about the gorilla tribe making gorilla noises. I wondered if that was in bad taste, and I realized it wasn't quite my place to comment on it, but that thought crossed my mind. But of course, they are the tribe that's represented by gorillas, so it was like a little more excusable. I know that's not the right word, but then also, the kids bringing down the spaceship and selling it or whatever. I think had this, for example, the gorilla tribe, had they been the only African tribe that we saw in a normal whitewashed Marvel movie about Iron Man directed by a white guy, that would have been offensive.
Okay.
And you take Rand Coogler, grew up in Oakland, and has now written multiple movies that have characters that are from Oakland or based in Oakland about the area where he grew up in. So he probably, as a director, has a better way to comment on that, the neighborhood kids playing basketball in Oakland than any of us, who not having grown up there. So I think if the director feels like that's an appropriate portrayal of where he comes from, that it's probably okay.
I was just going to say, as someone who's familiar with the other two movies by Ryan Coogler, one of the things he is very interested in is playing with like associations. So, for instance, Fruitvale Station, his first movie, plays with the angel and demon, or not angel and demon, but like the perfect person or the perfect villain, like dichotomy between like victims of police violence. And so the entire point is that the character is not portrayed as this like perfect person, kind of like, to use an example, and it's a very well made movie that goes into detail, but the movie Selma has like a protester in that movie that suffers a horrible fate, but he's only seen in the movie doing these positive things. And so then you get to Fruitvale Station where he's not a perfect character. There's some discrepancies between like his morality, but it doesn't imply that the morality causes or applies. And then you have Creed, where it's Michael B. Jordan who has everything, and the movie definitely plays with stereotypes again of what you're expecting based on Oakland. So it's kind of the mentality of this is how it is. It's a complicated situation. Plays into his movies very detailed ways.
Okay.
Oh, one real quick Marvel aside, just because I just remembered it. Who did you think that Bucky was at the very end?
Oh, so this is the second credit thing?
Yeah, the very last one.
Okay, so if you left the movie early for some bizarre reason after 10 years of watching Marvel movies,
There's always half the audience that does.
I know.
do you think they were learned after 10 years? You pan out into this tiny little mud hut with Shuri sitting outside. Sorry, before that, 3 little kids just staring at something or someone. This something or someone wakes up, the 3 little kids run out of the little hut, and they see Shuri, and then out comes Bucky, missing his arm, and Shuri calls him White Wolf. And this is part of the comic book line where Wakanda has one white person, and this is something maybe T'Challa adopted a white son, and they call him, the nation of Wakanda call him White Wolf. So I interpret it as that Bucky will be adopted by the Wakanda nation, and he is the White Wolf. He is the only white member of the Wakanda tribe. He will be
Captain America, White Wolf.
Captain America, White Wolf,
Winter
something like
Soldier.
that. Winter Shoulder.
He's gonna have a long
But
title.
White Wolf is an actual character. He kind of wears like the white. He kind of looks like a White Panther, essentially.
Okay.
So
I
I don't
the
know what
boring scene slightly more interesting.
I don't know what they're gonna do with that, because that's not who is supposed to be White Wolf. Bucky is not supposed to be that, but taking some sort of creative, what's that word?
Creative license.
Creative license. Thank you. I don't know what they're gonna play with.
Okay,
And
I
it
was
could
just
just be-
wanting to know your explanation because I had thought if anyone, they probably would have tried to do Martin Freeman, just to justify him being there. But since Bucky has to come back and be either Captain America or Winter Soldier, I really wasn't expecting him.
Yeah. So
And it could have just been a shout out as well to the White Wolf characters. Sometimes these things that come up
Easter
in
eggs.
movies, like at the end of Spider-Man: Homecoming, where we learn what's her face's name is MJ.
Zendaya.
She's probably not Mary Jane. She's MJ, but it's a shout out to MJ. But she also could be Mary Jane, the Spider-Man love interest. But I think maybe before Infinity War comes out, we should do an episode with our predictions about what's going to happen in Infinity War, because I have some thoughts about how setting up Bucky as the White Wolf could play into all of the people that I think are going to die in Infinity War. But that's a whole other podcast.
You missed the greatest Easter egg of all time, and it's from your favorite movie series.
What's that?
That's when Joseph Gordon-Levitt tells you that his name is Robin.
Oh, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
nothing ever happened.
No.
God.
I was
Thank
actually
God.
I was fine. I love those movies. I was fine with him letting it die. However, I wouldn't have minded a Christopher Nolan directed Nightwing series with Joseph Gordon-Levitt. But I knew that if that was going to happen, it wasn't going to be him. But that's not the point. We're not talking about that.
All right, yeah.
Sorry,
So
that was
sorry
meant
about
as a
my
joke.
side
That was meant
tangent.
as a
We'll get
joke,
back to the
sorry.
social commentary of Black Panther.
This is something that I spoke to Tunde about, and he mentioned it earlier about the women empowerment.
Yeah.
I started an individual sent me a text message that after they saw the movie, they said that they did not like the movie. If you did not like the movie, you're wrong, in my opinion. That they said that the one character, Wakabi, which, for those that are not familiar with the name, he's the one that controlled the rhinos at the end. Kind of
The
weird.
Blue Tribe.
Yeah.
Daniel Kaluuya's character.
She said that she saw him as weak and she couldn't get over it, And I interpreted the movie as there was only supposed to be one man in that movie that was supposed to be strong. And in my opinion, that man was T'Challa.
And even he
Struggled.
and he needed his family
Yes.
to help
and
him out.
I think that this movie did a phenomenal job empowering the shit out of women.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think
Yeah.
that we're glossing over this, but I think this is one of the later things we're going to talk to. We're obviously not the best people to comment on this, being predominantly male, but I agree. That's one of the things that this movie did really, really, really well.
I really loved Wonder Woman. Because again, like Black Panther, not a person I really followed in the comics, although her new reboot I really did enjoy. But I never followed Wonder Woman. I really enjoyed the movie, and I was so happy about seeing all the women empowerment. I think this movie did more.
Oh,
I honestly
I
think
agree.
it did more because it portrayed Wonder Woman, and I get that her flaws weren't because she was a woman, it's because she's an outsider, and I get that, but it still could be portrayed as, a weak woman at times. But this movie, there were no weak
The
women.
women were undeniably strong, and they carried
the strongest
T'Challa.
characters.
But
Yeah.
I'll highlight something as like the movie guy in the group that I liked about the female characters more is that there wasn't just the Ripley stereotype of empowered women where the empowered women are the ones with the biggest guns who just act like a man. Like they felt like their own characters with their own agency and their own decision making process and their own personalities, and it wasn't that extreme. Like I'm going to show my female character's powerful because she can kick everybody else's ass.
She's
like,
more
there was
masculine than the men.
There was
Yeah.
more. There was more to it than that, and that's what I
and
appreciated.
they weren't. There was no standard of beauty like having long hair.
Yeah, I think the empowerment actually came with also the women being comfortable in their skin, in their hair, and in the way they are.
Or lack of hair.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or lack of hair. Like.
And one of the things I liked is that they weren't strong or powerful because they were women or in spite of being women. They were strong, powerful characters
Because they were strong and powerful.
who happened to be female.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
that had nothing to do with them being strong and powerful. They were strong, powerful characters who happened to be female, which is the best way to approach that for empowerment of, I think, any group is.
Yeah, and then the empowerment or the strength is not just based on the fact that they are strong, like you said, with muscle and all of that, but they are also specialists in their fields. You have the engineer, you have the CIA guy, the undercover, the military. Like they are specialists in their field and they are very good at it.
Yeah, I meant strong as in emotionally strong, mentally strong. Just like they have strong character, not the masculinity, physical, but they are strong in what they need to be strong in to succeed.
And I totally agree with Russ. I think and I keep saying this, but one of the biggest strengths of the movie is its characters. Is that everybody in that movie is a fully realized character who has thoughts and emotions and a story arc and who you believe in their role. And a lot of those really strong, outstanding characters are women. Shuri was my favorite character because she's a young technologist and she kicked a bunch of ass.
Can we classify her as a Disney princess? She's a princess and in a Disney film.
In a franchise that's owned by Disney, so...
Pretty soon, speaking of Ripley, we can classify the Xenomorph as a Disney princess.
Oh my God, yes!
One more critique I have about the movie is how they did not provide the structure that causes Killmonger to be angry. Like they did not explain it. We all know, Black American, Black African American, all the structures that probably could affect him and make him to be angry. But the movie did no justice in addressing or showing us.
Yeah, I would have appreciated to see maybe after his father died, what kind of happened to him, because that he went to a very good university.
Yeah.
How did he get there?
That was something.
Was he adopted?
Exactly.
Did he bust his ass? How did he get there?
See, I took away that he worked hard because he became special ops. He went to MIT, which, by the way, someone was online ranting. I forget which podcast, but they were talking about how they don't mention that Killmonger went to MIT. Yeah, they do. They
Indeed.
absolutely
Yeah.
mention it.
Do they?
Yeah, it's in the comics, and they mention it in his backstory.
Yeah.
Right, but
Indeed.
you assume that he is now an orphan.
We don't know anything about the mother.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, but you assume because you got all of this.
But yes, he did bust his ass to get there. But how?
How?
He definitely had to go through some hardships.
Oh, for sure.
I disagree with all four of you on this one. I think the movie would have been weaker if we did
Oh,
that.
See,
I think that
I'm more in
it.
Russ's camp. On
Oh,
this
I'm
one.
sorry. I thought you were agreeing with them.
Well, I was kind of nodding and waiting to chime in.
Okay,
I'm
because
maybe in
like for
between.
me, I feel like if you do that, you are taking away from some of the other elements that we've talked about, like work, right? And so I think sometimes when you have this overabundance of flashbacks, because we talked about at the beginning how the origin of our main character is condensed into like 15 quick minutes in the previous movie. I think if you try to have this idea that you're going to over explain everything, it kind of takes away from his power as this like force of nature almost, where he has ideas that need to be reckoned with. And when you spend all this time over, like, I feel like if you cast a bad actor in the movie, maybe your critique holds, but Michael B. Jordan adds all these layers in his performance where you can kind of infer and make your own decisions about how he got there, and I think that makes it more interesting. But you look like you have a response.
Yeah,
so.
I disagree with you. The
Okay.
reason why I do is because Michael B. Jordan portrayed the stereotypes of a black, an African American, right? He's angry, went through stuff, and he's doing all of that. And you remember that the audience of this movie is beyond just America. A lot of people don't understand the social construct around being black in America, right? And so I think it just continue portraying that stereotype, which a lot of people and a lot of my people back at home don't understand. They're just like, oh, a typical African American guy being angry, like, and wants to come and take over the throne and complain about everybody and about everything, but it didn't explain to them how it got there, and they don't know. A lot of people don't understand. I didn't understand a lot of things around, the sheer structure around being black in America until I came to America, and then I see it.
Yeah, so it was kind of a shortcut
Mm-hmm.
American audiences are able to understand,
Yeah.
but international audiences don't have that explanation.
And
Yeah.
that's a great perspective. I hadn't thought
Yeah.
about it like that. I think from a storytelling perspective, I'm again more in Russ's camp, where maybe I'm just the dummy who doesn't see it coming. It did not occur to me that Killmonger was the kid playing basketball and the son of the guy in the thing until T'Challa found out, right? That didn't occur to me. And so had we followed the story of the kid, you see towards the end of the movie a flashback of young Killmonger going up and finding his dead father and all this. Had we seen that right away, or even in a series of flashbacks throughout the film of him working to become where he was, I think that takes away some of the surprise element and some of the power of the character later in the film. Plus, I think there may be a somewhat intentional decision to portray him only as T'Challa sees him, and so the audience only knows about Killmonger what T'Challa knows about
See,
him.
I
So
thought
we're
that-
learning.
Still have a scene that's Killmonger not from T'Challa's perspective when he
Mhm.
Right,
was the
when-
museum owner.
Yeah,
Well,
which
and
would
then
break
also
that.
in
Sure,
the
but-
airfield.
but also T'Challa would have learned those things from
Right,
Okoye.
and they're-
so,
okay.
So I see what you're saying, and yes, yeah, you're right. But also the audience doesn't know that much more about him really than.
Well, and on what you're saying is that, again, I don't think that he necessarily is a villain. I think he's an antagonist. We have to have a villain, though. But what I think is that T'Challa does not view him as a villain. He views him as someone that he has ideological differences from. But I think at the end it shows how much he respects him, and just like, I wish we could have hashed out our different, like, he says, don't make me kill you, I don't want to kill you, and then he even offers,
He offers
I
to
can
save him.
save you. And I think it's because he sees all the hardships that at first he didn't know and just pass them off, but then later on he sees them and how much he worked for and how much he has a point. Now he may be going about the ends the wrong way, but he has a point, and I think that T'Challa recognizes that and just views him not as a villain but as an antagonist, and is like, and I think that's maybe how we're meant to view him, is like, we have to have him as a villain because we know we have to have a villain, but in all reality he's not. He's just an antagonist.
And that's why I loved him for 95% of the movie.
Yeah.
Because I did agree with his, thought process. He just went about it the wrong way. And now that you bring up Killmonger's death, I thought the quote right before he died and he took out the spear out of his heart was so powerful.
That was my favorite line.
I
of
was-
the
I was
movie.
about to ask you guys to tell me your favorite lines.
was-
There's a lot of that.
I was-
So powerful.
I was sitting next to an actual African couple in the movie theater, and the husband who had been talking to them, and he had some great commentary, and it was great. He started clapping, and I loved it. I loved the running car. I was just like, that is beautiful.
Before we get too far away from it, can I ask a follow-up question to some of our disagreement then? So you said that part of the responsibility of this is because it's an international film, correct? To the portrayal of Michael B. Jordan's character. So my follow-up question is, because we're talking about how much we like how it represents a culture that honestly, like, it's an American movie made to make billions of dollars first and foremost, and so we have an artist who's doing interesting things, but at what point do we stop with an obligation to tell a story that applies to every culture? Like, because we're talking a lot about how much we like the cultural specificity of the movie, but then it also has an obligation to fill in other people. Where does that obligation start? So, like, if there's a movie made in South Korea, what obligation do they have to make sure that it portrays South Koreans to the international audience if it's the best foreign language picture and the Oscars, I guess?
Well, so every movie is gonna have its shortfall. We're just trying to identify the one around this. Like, there's no way you're gonna have a perfect screen.
Right. No.
But for these, I just feel like as an African American, the author, the director, right? I think he holds it. I mean, he doesn't have to do it, but I think it's going to be beautiful if he was able to at least show the world some of the experiences of an African American to get to that point.
And maybe if they show this as a two-part, of the second part, and the first one is, oh God, what was the NWA movie that just came out?
Straight Outta Compton.
Straight Outta Compton. Showing Oakland around the time that he grew up. There you go. I mean, even if you just had something like that.
And if I'm not
But
mistaken,
I think that would be a bad idea. I think
It
that
probably is a horrible
that movie
idea.
made by Disney is probably a terrible idea.
No, not made by Disney.
Okay.
Just like having two movies and being like, hey, first watch Straight Outta Compton so you understand Oakland in the 80s or 90s.
But
then
Straight
watch
Outta Compton's not really actually about cultural specificity. It's about NWA and Dr. Dre specifically.
Yeah.
Selling his image
I
into a
think-
new socially conscious generation led by Kendrick Lamar. Like, that movie's, I hated that movie, and it's because it was just a generic biopic about a rich billionaire branding himself to a new generation so he can continue to be rich.
I think to try to answer your question, I think I would see it maybe not spending a whole lot, but like a quick overview
Yeah,
of
just flash.
quick clips.
Yeah.
Like as soon as you see Michael B. Jordan holding his dad, just like maybe he looks into the camera and then just like flash forward a couple of years where you see him like doing something, then flash forward a couple more years where you see him doing something else.
Yeah.
Flash forward a couple of years where he's in Afghanistan, he's somewhere overseas doing those things that they mentioned.
Yeah.
And then just right there, boom, done. Moving on to him sitting in that museum in England.
Much better than my suggestion, yeah.
yeah,
But I
still
still think you could rewrite some of the current scenes as is and still highlight some of that. Like, you could turn the museum thing into like a cultural discrepancy, and you can reconfigure a few scenes as it is, because I think flashbacks end up burdening the movie. And that we would then be sitting here complaining that they spent too much time on it and there were structural problems. I think, again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier, that it's a Marvel movie. You cut down on some of those extreme action sequences designed for scale. You focus on action that reveals character, because we do reveal that his character is trained in that through how he interacts during the action scenes, like the tactical training. But we could have a scene in the museum where you see some of like the cultural differences rather than have it applied and kind of have the generic throwaway gag about the mask, that he likes it because it looks cool or whatever. And so I think that by rewriting some of the current scenes, you could still have that and it informs it. Because one of the changes I enjoyed, and I didn't know, I'm not very familiar with the comic books, and I looked it up, was they changed Claw quite a bit.
Yeah.
And the
yeah,
way
they
that
did.
they changed Claw was all about cultural specificity too, making him like this South African that clearly was benefiting from apartheid during the time period. And so I think by having those things inform the scenes, the movie's almost richer by having you not be having assuming the audience has a certain level of intelligence. So I feel like you then lose that, because you have to kind of make a point as, is this movie designed to teach the entire world a lesson, or is this movie designed to be thoughtful and entertaining? And so you get into where is that balance between assuming someone is not coming into this from a place of ignorance and assuming that you want to tell a thoughtful story. And I mean, that's an artistic debate that you could go on for days and
Yeah,
days
and there's
days
no
and never
answer.
have an
Yeah.
answer.
I agree with a lot of what you just said. I think I don't like flashbacks. I don't like the movie explaining things to the audience because I think it undermines the audience just in general. I do like the idea maybe of having that museum scene set in America and being slightly longer, and you could tie a few more of those kind of American culture things into it a little more, but also you're talking about a montage of him flashing forward through school, through Afghanistan, et cetera. So
Through just any
all
hardships too, yeah.
all the things that he says in his monologue right before he fights T'Challa, which make that monologue really powerful, all of a sudden become him saying things that the audience have already seen, and takes away from the weight of his words. And that,
Also,
and
something that I didn't catch till the second time around was the opening scene where you hear the little kid's voice saying, "Papa, tell me a story." The first time I saw it, I thought it was T'Challa, a conversation between T'Challa and T'Chaka. It's not. It's a story being told by Prince, what's his name,
Njobu?
Njobu, and his
Eric.
son,
And
Michael
his
B.
son.
Jordan.
And
Yeah.
Eric.
And Eric, yeah. Which,
Yeah, I had wondered
Starting-
which one it was there too when
Which,
I saw it.
coming back to what Russ says, I can see that, being a kid, not knowing where he's from, all that stuff, striving to be there, and then you just connect the dots and fill it in the
All
rest
right,
of the
hopefully
way.
you guys don't mind this too much, but I want to run this forward into an area where we can actually bring some of our scientific training in, and talking about this movie through the lens of environmental justices and ecological degradation. Again, this is an area where Tunde and I and Sebastian have training in. We know the history of. We've looked at this both in America and internationally. And for the audiences that don't know what we're talking about here, is that especially a lot of times you hear it as referred to as colonialism, and that's how it starts off, but it can get better or in some cases much worse over time when you get into systemic racism pretty much. And this is determining what cultures live where, what resources they have access to, and how much access, and then like also who lives downstream. Who lives with the smog, who lives with the pollution, who gets access to the lumber and the clean water, and all of that is labeled under environmental justice. And much of Africa was raped and pillaged through colonialism, just like much of America. Our white ancestors spread through America, and then we determined where minority groups could live and what resources they had access to. So you can see two different versions of environmental injustice occurring. And this movie is so much about a country being able to control their own resources and being like, we have control of it, and just how one simple change in environmental injustice can change an entire culture. And so, yeah, I really wanted to get into this because this movie is about ecology. I mean, when you really break it down, it is about ecology, and that's amazing.
And this is something that you guys definitely have more of an expertise in, so I'll kind of throw in a background and maybe my perspective on it and then let you guys take away the specifics. In North America, we have the North American model of wildlife conservation, where essentially the public owns the land and the wildlife and the various resources. So obviously we don't own all the land, but public land, U.S. land, state lands, etc., are owned by the public at large. So that means technically I own Yellowstone in some capacity.
Unless you talk to the Bundys.
Unless you talk to the Bundys, but that's another issue as well. But not everyone has equal access to those resources.
Right.
Obviously, somebody who lives in an inner city somewhere and maybe limited in their ability to have transportation somewhere or etc. will not have the same access to resources as someone who grew up in rural Missouri who had to drive 15 miles to school every day anyway. I could drive 15 miles the other direction and be on the river, be in the woods on this public land that I had access to. Something else from maybe a little bit of my expertise that I will point out is that in Missouri, every citizen lives within 30 miles of a public fishing access. I used to work in angler recruitment, and we had targeted efforts for youth in underrepresented communities. Because even though everybody lives within that distance, somebody who lives in North St. Louis, where Sebastian does some of his research, has a much different time getting there than me, growing up where I could just walk down the gravel road across from my house to the river. And so that's the kind of access to resources that are certainly valuable, I think, at a big
And even
part to do with
though
this
they're
movie.
equal, quote unquote, equal access, they are not.
Right.
They are not equal access.
And also it has a lot to do with cultural and the way you brought up. So if you told your mom, and when I say you, I mean Zach, told your mom, hey mom, I'm going to the river to go fishing, your mom would be like, okay, have fun, be home by dinner. That's the end of that conversation. If I, who grew up in New York City and, close to the projects, next to the projects, if I told my mom, hey mom, me and my buddies are going to the river to go fish, my mom would be like, you're gonna die, you're gonna be murdered, you're gonna be kidnapped, you're gonna see some drug hoodlums, you're not going anywhere. So for me, I have this fear instilled in me that if I go to the river, I'm gonna freaking die.
And I would comment on that and say that the river access that's closest to the house where I grew up is a known meth hub, and
Wow.
I was not allowed to go there by myself until I was in high school, and I could drive, and I had to be home by dark. But at that point, it was one of those things. I didn't even have to tell my mom I was going fishing. She knew if I didn't have homework, I was going fishing, and I would be back by dark. So yeah, in a sense, yes, I really didn't have to worry about drug hoodlums jumping me in the woods, and if I was a white 16-year-old, nobody was going to bother me at the boat ramp.
And this is a conversation that Zach and I had had. Zach and I come from two very different backgrounds. I went hunting for the first time last year, and he knows very well due to my raising, how I feel about guns. I am one of those people that associates guns with violence. They just go hand in hand, and that's the end of that conversation for me. However, since going out hunting, I realized there's more to guns, and there is gun responsibility and all this other stuff. But I will end that conversation there before this turns into a podcast about gun violence and gun control.
Right.
Well,
Keeping it on the environmental issues
Yes.
and
Yeah.
the social issues.
Well, I think something very interesting about the movie is how they try to portray a country, that is in charge of its resources, right, and which is able to use that to develop, all of the things that we saw in the movie. And looking at, most African country presently, we see that part of the impact, we see Africa as being poor and degraded and all of that, resources taken off and all that, and that is being, related to colonialism and all that, and so I think it's very interesting to see how, even though we know that everything is just an ideology of how a country could be if is allowed to, keep its resources.
Mhm.
And,
I like
develop
how
itself.
they were aware that if we went public, we would lose everything, and we would be like everyone else.
That was a team that was
I,
well.
I like that because it wasn't like they were playing the ignorant card and like, oh, we live in a perfect world and there's a shield. Yes, in part they were ignorant about what was going on to the 2 billion people that were living outside of this shielded community, but they knew what would happen if they went public.
But I guess isn't part of the movie wrangling the fact that what responsibility do they have to others versus like with that having that resource and being resource rich versus isolationism.
Oh yeah, no, there were a lot of American politics thrown in under African politics of isolationism, immigration, racial identity, racial government. There were a whole lot of American politics in there as well. Um, Definitely. Uh, but yeah, no, I was watching this movie and I'm trying not to talk to my girlfriend about like, oh, I study this stuff. I study stuff about how when people control their own resources and how their lives change. And so, yeah, it was.
One key thing that also that I was discussing with you that was very interesting was how do I put this? How the ecology of Wakanda, you know, was used in their spirituality.
Yeah.
So they use the purple
The
plant
purple-hearted
and all that,
fruit.
and to heal themselves. They use that to develop their power, the superpower that the Black Panther uses and all that. And that was from ecology. And then that was also what they used for their spirituality in a way.
Mhm.
You know, and African has been like that as a country where we have a lot of people use the herbs, you know, from plant and from animals to develop, you know, different things. But you know, over time, due to colonization and Christianity brought to Africa, all of that was, you know, like demonized. And they were like, no, it's voodoo, it's terrible. You know, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't. But people, according to history, people actually, I mean, even presently, people still use herbs and all of that to for their spirituality.
Mhm.
And but now, when we see that, if you're not a Christian or you're not practicing the Western spirituality, we feel like you're doing some terrible things, and that's one thing that they used in that movie that I feel is actually very empowering for Africans and for other people that believe in the power of ecology. You know, like plants being
It was very
medicinal and
pure.
all of that. What?
It was very pure and didn't have any negative connotations. And
Yeah.
I mentioned this earlier to you guys pre-discussion that the Caribbeans have a very strong African influence because it was used as a pit stop for slave ships, and there's a lot of voodoo and all that stuff, but we call it brujeria, which is witchcraft. And those people that mess around with chicken bones, sacrifice goats, or don't worship a single god are looked at as witches and they worship Satan. So yeah, I agree with you with the ecology aspect of that, the medicinal. I guess you can call it medicinal.
Yeah, medicinal spirituality.
Yeah, and I wondered if that herb was supposed to be, we talked about this, if it was supposed to be kind of like peyote, where it's a religious experience, a religious spiritual experience. Is he actually talking to his ancestors, or is he having, a hallucination that allows him to have some more spiritual inner peace? It doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter. But it's interesting because you can view other religions. There's a lot of Eastern and, in fact, a lot of indigenous, like American and European even, religions that dealt with this that we now view as wrong. Why? Why? Why do we view it as wrong if it's helping them? Okay, it's helping that person. Just move on.
I don't want to get too deep into this conversation because recently um, I just read a couple of things about how that was taken from African during slavery because they were using that, and then like the colonial master or the slave master was like, no, we have to take this from them and give them our own religion and teach them that you have to be nice to people that do wrong to you and all that, to use it to control them in a way. But I mean, that is deep, and I'm a Christian and I believe in Christianity and all that. But I just find it very amusing, watching, reading the article and then watching this movie. Same week, actually, same week. So
Yeah.
I read that and I had a conversation with somebody about that. Like, this is interesting. And then I went to watch Black Panther and I saw how they were using the herbs, to do all of that. I was like, oh, okay. Who took this from us? Why can't I use? And there's a lot of power in the
If it's
herbs
different,
and
it's
plants.
a threat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Difference is a threat.
Just human way of life. If it's different, it's a threat.
So what other environmental themes did we find in this movie?
I mean, they lived in a country without pollution. I can only dream about that. Just a country without pollution.
Sounds great.
And how they were able to just keep the country clean. And part of it is that there was, even though there were different tribes and they had some segregation amongst the tribes, people were free to move around. And if people are free to move around and not forced to live somewhere like they are in the U.S. for centuries, you really don't want to pollute over here because, I might or my child might live over there one day too. So I really don't want to pollute there. And, I live here now. I really don't want to pollute here now. And so you're looking at this idea where when there's equality among access to resources, you tend to kind of take care of them a little bit better. And that's basic human nature. We're kind of a greedy people, but we can also be very social and very proactive and progressive in our thinking and be like, okay, well, if I take care of this, it helps my neighbor and myself. I'm good with that.
The one that stuck out with me was Oakland, it being a real city and not a made-up nation. Is Wakanda a real nation? Before I stick my foot in my mouth, okay. Before it's a made-up nation with all these riches, Oakland, very much like St. Louis, where I work in, has a lot of abandoned building a lot of abandoned home issues, and that's from years of housing segregation and all this redlining and trying to zone things in a way that benefit a certain group of people, and who cares about the rest. So when Shuri goes, oh yeah, this home is abandoned, who cares? That's like super real, and you can go Los Angeles, Oakland, St. Louis,
Chicago.
Detroit, Chicago. You close your eyes, just be like that home abandoned, that building abandoned. That's very real, and that was a I it connected to me because that's where I do my research,
Yeah.
and that's the environment that I do my research in, and I've seen some truly appalling things, and it's just you walk around and I've thought to myself, am I still in this country? Because we are America. We are born and bred thinking America's number one, the rest of the world is number two. But like you go see these areas and it's just like, holy shit, we are still in America. This looks like war torn, third world nation. I saw a car stripped, and when you think of a car that's stripped, you probably think cinder blocks. That's it. No, this bad boy was stripped to the frame. Paint was gone. It was just a metal frame. Everything was gone but the metal frame. It was terrifying. Terrifying.
Well, and also to your point on an area that's similar but almost opposite, but it's strange how similar it is I used to work on the East Coast in the rural lands looking at habitat and especially specifically bats. Go to West Virginia, really really rural area. Pollution is enough to make you just sick. And again, it's people don't have money. How am I going to make money? And I don't have access to these resources, so why the fuck do I care? I am just going to dump this car battery in this pond, and I don't care, and I'll walk away. Or I'm just going to throw all of these tires in this stream and walk away. I'm going to cut down this tree that's 200 years old and providing a shit ton of habitat and or nuts for wildlife or something like that.
And oxygen.
And I'm just going to cut it down and use it, for firewood and stuff like that. And so again, just like you're sitting here walking around, you're like, this can't be America. This is not the America that I was brought up and sold on. Like, this is the U.S. Like, are you serious? Look at this this degradation of the environment it's mind-boggling.
And this stuff is really really important, and that's why people like us who have good access to those resources and have we get to do some research in some of the best areas and some of the worst hit areas too, and so we see it all, and that's why we have a passion for providing better access to resources for everybody and better environmental education to people that have historically been systemically not given access to those resources. And you'll find in our field that minorities are horridly underrepresented, and I think that's directly related to the likelihood of somebody in America growing up as a minority and having access to those resources. I can't speak for everybody at the table, but I got into this field because I loved fishing as a kid, and I had an uncle who was a biologist who taught me about biology, and I had somebody to show me that I could learn this and that it was interesting, and I got to go experience it. And that's why these issues hit so close to home, even for me as somebody who doesn't work in those harder hit areas and doesn't do my research specifically on environmental justice issues, is that the reason I do what I do is because I had better access to resources than somebody else who is just as smart and motivated and driven as I am, but never got to see the joy of being in nature and in those resources.
Zach brings up a point which actually works as a nice segue into something else I wanted to bring up about the social issues, and that's representation, right? You had someone who could teach you. You saw other people like you. It's one of these reasons why this film is very important, and I'm going to go on a little bit of a side rant here, just a monologue, but Wonder Woman and Black Panther have made me change my views. And again, I thought I was a very well experienced, well educated, intelligent, very open person, and I am, but some of my views on representation. I agree that representation is highly important and it should be promoted. But recently with Wonder Woman and the all-female screenings and just, little boys and little girls looking up to Wonder Woman and being like, I don't, young girls being like, there's a woman in power, and young boys being like, there's just someone in power, and I'm appreciative of that. And then Black Panther, the black communities in America just, being so happy and enthralled. It's changed my views on some representation, and I'm going to hark back to like two examples, and that's Ghost in the Shell, the recent live action atrocity, and Iron Fist going back into Marvel. These were two characters that initially I was okay. I was like, I don't care if you cast a white or an Asian actor. I'm on the fence because I can make arguments for and against. Now, my arguments for a white character in Iron Fist still stand if they had followed the protocol of the original Iron Fist, in that he experienced racism because he was white, and that was a way of introducing how it feels to be prejudiced against to a white audience. But they didn't explore that, and so that point was moot. And at that point, why did you not hire an Asian actor? When I'm looking at Ghost in the Shell, had they followed the original Ghost in the Shell story, a white or an Asian actor, it didn't matter because her shell was technically both at some point in time. But when the story they did in the movie, how on earth do you justify not hiring an Asian actor? And so I'm looking at this, and this has changed my views on representation, on how important it truly is, and on how something that as a white male I think is trivial or I can justify another way, and after these, I'm just, no, representation matters. It matters much more than I thought it did, and I thought it was important. Now it matters on so much of a stronger level, about people being able to look up and see someone who looks like them, or even just doesn't look like what they're expecting. You had a white guy teaching you how to fish and the importance of biology. That's the same for me. And how many students are we losing out on? How many future scientists, future historians, future philosophy professors and thinkers are we losing out on because they are not seeing people like themselves? And again, this is jealous for science, but in a superhero movie, it's empowering to entire communities. And I am just blown away by how little I knew about representation, and how I'm glad these movies have opened my eyes. So.
Sorry, just to add to what you said, and Kogla did a great job by not just casting African American, but we went as far as picking Kenyan, someone from Kenya, from different part of Africa, from Britain, a black British guy, like Asian black guy from all over the world, to bring that representation in. So it's, even you see, probably you don't know, the movie sold a lot in Africa. Like in my country, everybody was watching. People were wearing their lockets, so people could find out.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And not only representation, but from a business aspect, why are we not bringing more diversity? And we mentioned this earlier in our one-on-one podcast about bringing in Miles Morales. I bet you, however much millions, if not billions of dollars Black Panther has made, it is primarily due to the black community. Yeah, you got your comic book nerds.
33% of the audience.
Which is typically double from what a normal Marvel movie would have.
It's a much higher percentage. That's the percentage from the tracking.
33,
so
and
the
then
extra money, the record.
33 above.
No, it's 33%, but that is like double what a normal Marvel movie would be.
So the extra money, the record-breaking money that this movie is bringing in is all because of these black audiences who are going to see it.
And then, and I said it earlier, I'm like, if they were to make a live-action Spider-Man with a Miles Morales, I can bet every single dollar in my bank account that the Hispanic community, or the Latin community, the African Hispanic community, whatever you want to call them, they would break the box office, because we're all going to go see it. Yeah. If you saw an Asian character, a leading character, I bet you the Asian community would break the box office. Like, it's just a business move at this point, why they're not doing it.
Well, it's beyond that too. And one thing that got me thinking about this issue is, are you familiar with The Simpsons? Everyone's familiar with The Simpsons. It's based entirely on stereotypes, and sometimes it's in a subversion, and sometimes it's not. There was a film that came out earlier this year, and I actually thought there were some problems with the way it made its argument. But I thought overall it was very thoughtful, and it made me think, called The Trouble with Apu.
Yeah.
Have you heard about?
So
the premise of it is that because that is the only representation that you have, that stereotype becomes more damaging and builds. And so I think when we're talking about this though, I'm looking at it and I'm wondering like, because like we're looking at the movie Get Out, which is probably set to at least win a couple Oscars. Some people think it's the Best Picture winner. And how many of these movies though are being accepted not from the money perspective, but from the artistic perspective, just because they're issue movies? And when are we going to move beyond making it an issue movie and just have more a diversity of storytellers and points of view start to take place?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one key to this representation in Black Panther that's different, and I've even heard some of the actors in interviews talk about this, is it's awesome to see black actors cast in a movie that's not about slavery.
Mm-hmm.
And it is about social issues, but this isn't Selma. This isn't a movie that's specifically about a social issue. It's a superhero movie that tons of people are going to go see, and there's a bunch of white kids that are going to grow up seeing that representation, and their opinions on racism are going to be changed.
I want to clarify that I think Selma is a fantastic movie, and I used that earlier.
Yep.
And
I should clarify also, I'm not throwing Selma under the bus.
And the director of Selma is doing A Wrinkle in Time, which is going to be
awesome.
interesting another conversation about representation as well.
I brought this up to Tunde yesterday, and sure, social issues were brought up in the movie, but my interpretation and my take-home message away from the movie was, yes, it happened, we were there, things were wrong, let's move on. Let's move forward.
And I was going to comment on that earlier when we were talking about some of those issues, is the movie presents them in a way that's undeniable, and the way, specifically with Killmonger's character, that his experiences led him to be the way he is. But they don't beat you over the head with it either. It's like, this is the way this character is, this is why this character is this way.
At some point, does that also let audiences off the hook? So by making this a superhero movie and making it a secondary issue, when you're engaging in these important, thoughtful issues that are increasingly easy in an entertainment-based society to push aside, are you letting people off the hook by having an ending that I've seen a lot of criticism that the movie's ultimately too conservative? Like the Breitbart, which is ultra conservative, thinks that Black Panther is a Trump allegory. I kid you not.
Yeah, but Trump people like to think everything's Trump.
Right, I agree. But at some
allegory.
point, the end of the movie, does it just comfort people to complacency? I guess is my question. By not foregrounding those issues more, and then the ending really is, it's a powerful, beautiful ending that also lets you feel good about how you are right now.
Right, but also, is that needed in a Marvel movie?
Yeah, I was gonna say, is that a Marvel movie, or is that like an issue movie? Like
That's an
Get
issue.
Out.
Yeah, and I think it's a Marvel movie, and it's great for representation because it can just kind of be like, hey, this is a black superhero movie where you get to see black superheroes and you can relate, and there are some social issues that help frame it, but it isn't. I don't think it's a Marvel movie's place to be like, let's address every social injustice.
I'm not saying address every social injustice, but it's in conversation with those social injustices.
Oh, sure, we're talking about social injustice framed through this movie. It deserves to be brought up, but I also think it's okay to just be like, it is a comic book movie.
I think sometimes movies do have an ending that makes you not feel so bad about it. I think in this movie, for what it is, I think it's fine, but I think also we can't. Those issue movies, the Selmas, the Get Outs of the world, are really important for representation and for not having.
But Get Out's an entertaining movie. You can watch that movie not understanding the subtext, and it's a movie designed with like entertainment in mind as well. It's not just an issue movie. It's a horror movie first and foremost.
I don't think maybe get off the hook is the right way to say it, because it is part of our history. It is part of U.S. history. It is part of African history. It is part of the world's history. So we should not forget in that context that it is part of history. But we should forget in the context that we are all one. We are all humans. We're here to help each other out, and that's why Wakanda opened up its doors at the end and saying, we're gonna give you our riches and our resources to help you out. And the one reporter is like, what resources do you have to offer? That was Wakanda,
Slightly smiling.
Slightly smiling and reaching out the hand and giving it a helping hand, be like, we got you.
Which, by the way, how can that be equated to Trump? We're going to help you. We're going to share our resources.
But
I'm sorry.
The idea being is that they're relative isolationists that make small compromises, like Trump has made small compromises.
Yeah. No, I get the isolation issue. It's a very American issue, but it's been other countries. I mean, Japan, China, the U.S. Yeah. There have been other countries with isolationist issues. In fact, I'm sure there's a lot of countries and Americans that would like America to be a little bit more isolationist.
Yeah, that's why Trump got elected. But I saw the Trump allegory.
Oh, I was
in,
using
yeah.
it as I don't really want to address the Trump allegory because I think it's a crappy one.
It is.
I was going to use it to address the fact that a lot of people are like, including people who, from an artistic background, are criticizing the movie for being ultimately too conservative.
We just have
And
to,
so-
just have to come back to it's a superhero movie.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but what I was going to say is I saw it more in T'Chaka than in T'Challa because
yeah.
he had a history of isolationism. He did not tell his son what was going on so that he would
And he
continue
let
to have
people
that.
die
But
for that ideal.
The character arc of T'Challa is that he realizes that not sharing their wealth, their knowledge, their resources with the rest of the oppressed communities in the world is where his
Wrong.
father went wrong, and he moves against that.
Yeah.
So it sort of was like, in my mind, the movie did a great job of explaining why that isolationism ideal is bad. That's the most general way you could put it, and so
Yeah, we're a global community anymore. You cannot get around it. We have instant communication and understanding, or not necessarily understanding, but the ability to understand issues that occur worldwide in an instant. We are a global society. People have to learn to deal with that.
Yeah, well, I agree with that, but in a way, I think because I already had this conversation with one of my African American friend who always tell me like, "You guys just left us behind here. You could have come." I was like, "No, it doesn't work like that." People don't even understand. So people outside the U.S. and this may be difficult for you to really, really grasp. Now, people, a lot of people, especially from Africa, like, well, things are much better now, but a lot of people really don't understand the details of, like the challenges of other people, and so people just do their thing. Like, as a matter of fact, the few people that want to come to say they want to come to the U.S., they want to come because they want to escape from whatever challenges they're going through in their country. Do you understand? It's not like they want to come here. And so, T'Challa, if you look at it, it's not like it's initially finally mentioned a couple of times that, oh, we don't want the outside world to know we have these resources. But a lot of time, they just want to be themselves, just keep to themselves, and like just be a country. Like you said, most countries are like that. But America, the reason is America is more like an immigrant country, right? And so it has always been different from most other
America
countries in
is
the
the
world.
great experiment, and because of that, we're different, right? Because
Yeah.
we're throwing all of our cultures together. That will make us a little bit more likely to also expand. Because it's people from all cultures meeting, and again, I'm a proud American, and I hope that we come out of the experiment better. And I'm proud to be part of a melting pot, and I'm okay with white straight males not being in power all the time. Like, let's get some of that representation. Let's learn from other people and cultures. Let's become a global society. I mean, the Earth becoming a global society is basically America expanding. I don't think it needs to be America. I think America needs to be America. But that same idea of people are coming together all across the world. Learn.
That's what makes this country great. So another funny thing is, you wouldn't know how great America is because it's like you have something. Like, it's just an iPhone. It's just my phone. But somebody else that's never undo something like this will freak out when they have, access to it. And so America is great. And what makes it great, like you said, is like the being center meeting point where we have a lot of people, a lot of brains from all over the world, and it can only get better. And I think it's gonna get better.
Yeah, no,
You know.
I've always loved the U.S., but it's so interesting is I've met some really conservative people. I'm from an area that has just as many conservatives as it does liberals, but the idea that when I travel and I say, oh man, I loved when I lived in Korea. Oh man, I loved when I lived in Ireland. Oh man, I loved when I lived in Germany. I really enjoyed my time in the Costa Rican research stations. And people are like, oh, well, how come you hate America? And I'm like, those travels made me love America more. They just also introduced a love for other places. I can love Korea and the US. It's not mutually exclusive. And because I'm experiencing more cultures, I'm becoming so much more fascinated with the world and learning about it, and also much more appreciative of what I have in America. I love Missouri. I grew up in Kansas City. It's my favorite place in the world. But do not think that for one instance, if someone's like, you want to go to Berlin or Seoul or back to San Jose, that I wouldn't be like, that sounds great. Let's go there. Like, I would jump on it. So
and tying it back into the movie.
yes,
This is a podcast about Black Panther.
Sorry, I was talking
no,
about
no,
the
I
representation that
understand.
the
No, we are
yeah.
talking about representation because
Yeah.
I think this is all relevant.
I thought you already did.
Yeah, I drank a lot of water.
Oh.
So I think we're about ready to,
Yeah, I
to
think
wrap
we're wrapping up.
So I will kind of tie this up as saying that I think the things that we were just discussing about things that make America great and how you love traveling and seeing other cultures, Wakanda in this movie learned, and T'Challa learned, that they can share that globalized society and take part in it and make their country greater by contributing to other countries and helping out and being just a source of knowledge and resources, but still maintain their identity.
Yeah.
Because this movie is
Yeah.
about place, and it's about how a place applies to identity, like we talked about in the beginning. And I think what the characters learn is that we can maintain our identity and our sense of place, but still share that with the rest of the world because we think it's great and we think it's something that we have to offer.
All right, so let's real quick, 10 seconds a person, final thoughts on the movie. Let's start with you so you can get out of here.
I give the movie a soft 8.5 out of 10. Sorry, flip that around. A hard 8.5 out of 10. A soft 9. It had a lot of themes, a lot of messages that I really appreciated. And yes, I think it's the best Marvel movie that's been made in the last 10 years, but it's not my favorite.
Zach?
I think also it's probably the best quality, and we're talking technical cinematic quality here, and screenwriting, all this stuff. Somebody's a roommate in this room doesn't know the difference between your favorite and the best, and so I just want to clarify that.
Wow, shade. Got shady in here.
But I will
Shots
say,
have been fired.
I will say, yeah, I think it's probably one of the best Marvel movies. It might be my favorite. I haven't decided yet. I really like Logan.
God, Logan is so good, yeah.
Yeah.
But I struggle giving movies a numerical rating, but I will say it's a top 3 comic book movie for me, and it did a lot of things right that I appreciate from. Now I don't know as much about writing as our friend Russ, but the technical aspect of how the film is structured and written and how great the characters were.
You give this movie a 4 out of 10 coming out.
Your 10 seconds are well over.
Yeah, well, Sebastian keeps interrupting me. But those aspects of the film shone a lot brighter than they do in many other superhero movies, and everything else was just as solid as they are in a lot of Marvel movies, so that's why I like it so much.
All right, I love the movie. I think it's very great. I'm not a movie critic, so I'll just give it like 10 because I love the way it represents the black culture, African culture, everything. I love. I just love everything about the movie. So
I really liked it. It's one of the few Marvel movies I'd rewatch. Most of them I don't do well when I try to rewatch them. This one I think I would rewatch again. It actually kind of reminded me. I'll put in one plug of Akira Kurosawa's adaptation of King Lear Ran.
All right, guys. I'm gonna just reiterate. I think it is the best made Marvel movie. It's not my favorite, but I definitely think it is well worth the hype and it's well worth the praise. If you haven't seen it, go see it. It brings up a lot of good. It's a good comic book movie, and it brings up a lot of issues that are important to the people in this room. And real quick before we go, I'm sure we all just want to thank Tunde for stopping by, being our guest commentator today. We really appreciate it. So
He will be back in the future, possibly.
Yeah, possibly.
yeah, thank you for having me.
All right, guys.